All right, and welcome to our latest installment of Rebels of the Heart. I am thrilled for our guests today and for the conversation that we're about to have. Thank you for all of our listeners and watchers who joined live, as well as those who will watch this as the follow-on on the recording. So with that, we will welcome Samara to Rebels of the Heart. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and what you're working on right now, Samara. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Derek. I'm so honored to be in the amazing company of the guests that we have today. For background, I am the co-founder and general manager of Transform, formerly known as HR Transform, which is really a community bringing together people-first leaders that are thinking about and working on re-envisioning the now and next of work. I personally am a connector at heart, and I think eternally curious, which makes my role, one, certainly a privilege that I get to meet so many amazing leaders, usually behind the scenes. So I admit I don't normally join podcasts. So this is an unusual circumstance today, but excited to be here amongst friends, having conversations about topics that I'm really passionate about. And I know our community more broadly is really passionate about as well. So thank you for having me.
Amazing. I'm happy you're here, and I'm happy that you're in Phoenix actually as well. So welcome to our state. So, and we have a whole coast to coast group today. So going over to Josh, who's in Minnesota. Welcome, Josh, to Rebels of the Heart.
Wish I was in Phoenix with all of you right now as the temperature drops. Very glad to be with you today. My name is Josh Drean. I developed a love for HR and work tech while I was building a startup out of the Harvard Innovation Labs. We were working to pioneer sentiment analysis in real time. I think that's a fancy way of saying I care very much about employee engagement, how to collect that data in a way that makes sense, and then implement insights in a way that matters to the employee experience. I later became an advisor and dug even further into work tech, what it looks like from a corporate lens, also what it looks like from a Web3 lens. So I talk a lot about decentralization and AI. I work a lot with young startups who are interested in pushing the boundaries of what's possible with these emerging technologies and what it means for work. That led me to co-author a book. It's coming out next year. The title is Employment is Dead, How Disruptive Technologies Are Changing Our Relationship with Work. And before we panic about that title, it's very rooted in human-centric digital-first design. So that's really exciting. Really excited for that to come out with my co-author, Deborah Perry-Pashoni. And we are both co-founders of the Work3 Institute, where we help companies marry workforce strategies with Web3 technologies. So really excited to dig in with these experts today.
That's a very rebellious topic, Josh. So I'm looking forward to digging into that as well. So thanks for being here.
Should have worn my shirt.
Yes, indeed. You will have one shortly. And Erica from New York, or in New York at the moment, on the way to Florida. Welcome back as one of the few. I think you were the third person to come back for a second episode of Rebels of the Heart in nearly 4 years of doing this and hundreds now of episodes. So welcome back to Rebels of the Heart. And you have a book that's just been released as well. So
I do. And Josh, I love the idea for your book and the title. I can't wait to hear more about it. So I just wrote my third book, which is the final installment in what I am calling the Human Workplace Trilogy.
Love it.
And it is right here, The Retention Revolution. And Josh, you'll be interested to know that in each of the chapters, there's what I call a sweet spot, which is a technology that I profile that helps leaders and organizations find the sweet spot between tech and connect. Meaning, how do we leverage technology for all of its greatness, which clearly we are all doing right now, spread out across the country. But when, how, where, why do we put that technology in its place and connect in real life, whether that's in Las Vegas in March at Transform, where everyone needs to be, yes, or in Phoenix, where it's warmer, or you can come visit me in Florida. So I'm all about the tech, even though I did write a book called Bring Your Human to Work. So the high level of what this new book is about is that the retention revolution says that the world of work is changing. And as Josh says, employment is dead. But in my world, the world of work is changing and people aren't going to stay with one company their whole careers. They're not going to probably have 2, 3, or even 4 companies their whole career. So the revolution is that we as leaders need to be really intentional about how we onboard and how we connect people to our mission and our vision and our values early and often from day one, even during recruiting. And while they're with us during their, tour of duty or whatever we want to call it, we want to help them to develop up, down, and sideways, and really get creative about growth and development, because even especially Gen Z, they want growth and development even more than compensation in many cases. And then when the person does come and say, Derek, I am moving on, we as leaders need to take a deep breath, maybe meditate for a minute, and refrain from the "you're dead to me, don't let the door hit you in the behind," and instead think about ways that we can leave gracefully and stay connected, because that is the virtuous cycle of work.
Love it. Thank you for that overview of the book. And we're going to explore that in detail and some of the topics here that are relevant. So again, for our guest, Derek Lunston, I'm the president and chief culture officer of Life Guides, as well as the host of Rebels of the Heart. I have that privilege, which I've enjoyed over the last several years. And Life Guides is a technology platform that connects people who have been through life experiences to be supportive guides for people going through those same experiences to help them thrive in and outside of the workplace, wherever that may be. So we're going to jump into this now and talk about this topic. So a theme that all of you gave voice to, and I know you all have a lens and a view on, is this idea of employee engagement. I mentioned in the beginning of this episode profile that we're going to the holiday season, right? It's right around the corner, it's starting imminently. It's a time that many people are reflecting on their life, on their situation, on their relationships, on their career. It's a time where engagement oftentimes will dip for a variety of reasons in that way. And as we were talking about in the green room, it's been years right now of challenge that seem to be just continuing to wave over us. And right now, geopolitically, there's a lot of uncertainty and challenge in the world at a time where people are beginning to go inward and do that self-examination of themselves and their relationships and their purpose. How do we support people right now? And what are you seeing kind of in your interactions? Erica, you were sharing some stories earlier. Samara, you're at a conference that's exploring this right now. You're talking about this idea of sovereignty. Josh, what does that all mean right now as we think about this next 30-ish days? And then as we look to 2024, how is that going to affect employee engagement broadly, and also how we support and connect with individuals, to use your word, with intention and personal, grace, for lack of a better term. So any way you can riff with that. There's no set stone here, no set path. So feel free to chime in if you'd like.
Who wants to go first?
You go, Samara.
Oh, I don't know. I think that the holidays are always a really interesting time in and of themselves, right? Absent all of the other things that are happening in the world right now. And so, I think certainly as I talk to a lot of leaders and as I'm thinking about our own organization, I think creating space for just real human connection and conversation is really important. Making sure to check in with your teams, to give them space to share how they're doing. I certainly am an advocate for in real life connection. So our team has been growing a lot. And so I was telling Erica, I'm reading her book this morning and was really enjoying the onboarding portion of the deck, because we have 3 new team members coming on in the next 3 months on the Transform team, which is amazing. And we are bringing the full extended team together early December for an offsite. And so I'm really looking forward to making space for everyone just to get to know each other. As much as it's important to focus on the business, I think creating space to allow people to make deeper connections on a human level that aren't transactional is more important than ever.
Beautifully said.
Josh, you want to go next, and then I'll pipe in?
I was kind of hoping you would go, Erica, and then
I'll go
for a second.
I'm happy. I'm happy to go.
You're already pressing some hot buttons that I feel is really important for us to discuss in your intro and some of the things that we talked about in the prep call. So let's continue to kind of run with that foundation. The last installment in your book, and and have a discussion around that.
Yeah.
Real
Well, Samara, what I would say as it relates to what you just said, and I love that the onboarding chapter resonated and that you're bringing, everybody together for an offsite. What I tell leaders to think about is doing what you say you're doing right now, is the work, or it is part of the work, instead of, we need to do work and so it's this shift in, there is a correlation between connection and performance. So, you're getting ready, you're going to put on this big, huge, amazing conference. And what it reminded me of in looking at that correlation, a lot of my work is inspired by a study out of Cornell, that a professor was studying what makes one team higher performing than another team. And his father was a firefighter. And so he studied the firefighters. And what he found was that the firefighters who are the most dedicated to the ritual of the firehouse meal, coming together, in real life, correlated with higher performance, and those firefighters save more lives. So as you were saying that, and I love that you're doing an offsite, and we know people have to invest, it costs real money to do that. But you can imagine fast forward and putting on a huge event, anything with your clients, with your customers, with your team, and then let alone a big, huge event in Las Vegas. Like, it is stressful. And when I interviewed a lot of firefighters, what they found was that when you get to know people as humans and know what's going on in their lives, when they get to that really stressful moment, when something happens and the screen isn't working and the technology isn't working, you just end up giving each other more grace, and you're able to then work together more effectively. So I love that. And I would tie it, Derek, to your opening question, which is when we think about the next 30 days, because quite frankly, the last 30 days have been some of the most stressful days I can remember in my lifetime for many reasons. And we think about going into 24, I think what we need to lean in on is, and this is what we saw in March of 2020. And I often say, I don't want to go back to March of 2020 for myself or for the leaders I work with, but I don't want to forget all of what I saw and how we felt. So, and that's obviously where life guides come in. But I want in 2024, in the next 30 days, I love the way you framed it. I want to think about that even more. But how can we continue to be more human and to check in with the people that we work with and say to them, how are you really doing? And actually mean it.
Well said. And as you know, that is entirely one of the core components of Life Guide. So thank you for highlighting that, Erica, and what the work that we're doing. To that point, I just want to kind of highlight this because, Samara, the Transform community has really kind of grown and flourished through the last few years. I would love for you to share a bit about why that is. I mean, in a lot of times it's been a challenging time for you to grow, but you have built one of the few communities, in my opinion, that's really just kind of grown like wildfire, and you're doing these in-person events. And I believe you're building that connection and that spirit that Erica had kind of described. I'd love for you to share a bit about kind of the origin and the vision for where it's going right now in the lens of what Erica was just sharing for checking in on people.
Sure. So Transform was born back in 2018, and it's certainly been a journey for us. So this is actually going to be the 5th year of the event in March. So that's a pretty big milestone for us that I'm very proud of. We're expecting over 3,000 attendees. But I think and it's grown each year that we've had the event. But I think what's really special about this community is, number one, it's a community of communities, right? So it's really been an event and a community that's built by and for the community. And so it allows, the community to tell us what's important to them, right? Both from a experience perspective, a content perspective, the people that they want to see in the room, the people that they want to engage in conversations. But I think, beyond it being a community of communities, I think people are really hungry for that human connection. And this is very much a human first event. So as much as you can curate amazing content and experiences, at the end of the day, what people are going to continue to come back for is the people that are in the room, right? The magic is really about the people that you bring together, the conversations that take place in the hallway, the kind of serendipity that happens when you bring people together. And people are really hungry for that human connection, building those relationships, reconnecting with the people that they already know in the community, helping learn from one another, kind of sharing and giving back to the community, sharing their own experiences and expertise. And so really our job is to just provide a platform and the right environment to help facilitate that magic. And that's what we try to do each year.
Beautiful. Well, I look forward to joining you, and I know you're doing an amazing job from everything that I've heard about the experience. So look forward to that. So I'm going to cut for a second. We're going to come back to humanity and human connection, but you kind of primed it up about what people are yearning for in that sense. Josh, you're an expert and a thought leader around artificial intelligence and this idea of decentralization. There's a lot of, for lack of a better term, conflicting points of view and perspectives around what artificial intelligence will do to the workplace, to human connection, to people's employment, to people's growth paths, to use some of your words. Erica, would love for you to kind of share your point of view on some of those tension points, and what you see around artificial intelligence contributing or detracting from human connection, and what you're doing in your work to drive that forward.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I just want to make sure that we start with the same foundation that Samara and Erica started with, which is being human-centric, right? Who we target, our audience at the Work3 Institute is human-centric, digital-first leaders. And that's individuals who are, yes, interested in becoming more digital, but also staying rooted in that human, in the employee experience, really. And as we talk about, all of these things that we should be doing to be more human at work because it pushes forward, productivity, employee satisfaction. Erica, you mentioned these studies out of Cornell. Like, we have the data, and we know that when we focus on employee experience design, not only are employees happier, they are more productive, a happy employee, all the things that we live and breathe every single day. I don't have to rehash them in front of your audience because we're obviously here for a reason. My concern is when we see employees wanting something and we see companies doing the exact opposite. That's the biggest rift that I see right now, especially when we look at return to the office. There was a report that just came out yesterday from Scoop, which is in partnership with the Boston Consulting Group, that shows that flexible remote work is 16% more productive. And they did this study across 500 organizations over 3 years. Like, we have the data. So what's the problem here? Is it we're not implementing employee experience design well enough? Or have we just abandoned employee experience design because the economy is really tough right now and employees don't have as many options as they did at the Great Resignation? So what I see is this power dynamic that was kind of starting to find some equilibrium, right? Work is a partnership. It's a relationship to, I'm the boss, you're the employee, I set the rules, you have to follow them. If not, you're going to have to find another job. Like, they're less inclined, it feels, to talk about burnout, less inclined to do all of the great stuff that Erica is talking about. And Erica, you can maybe share about some of the hard conversations that you're having. And so I'm laying this foundation to say, when we talk about AI, sometimes it's hard to even hear it because we're already stressed with the myriad of things that are happening at work. Add a level of fear on top of that of AI is going to replace my job. I think that, like, especially from an HR standpoint, it's just too much to think about right now. And so we kind of like put that on the back burner. Whereas the work that I do, and you already hinted at this, Erica, is that I believe that going more digital is going to make us more human, because we will, in a digital virtual environment, have some of those serendipitous connections that you talked about, Samara. We'll have more of an opportunity to connect with our employees. And so there are a lot of great things to come down the road, especially concerning AI. It's just, I'm concerned when I see a CEO over here who's human-centric and says, we will augment human potential. And then there are CEOs that you see that are like, ooh, how is this going to reduce costs, especially because talent is so expensive? Thank you. That's an exact tension point that I was kind of speaking to, is that there are exactly that. I know CEOs personally in both camps that are
that are looking at human augmentation of capability and literally saying, I will not bring artificial intelligence into the business at the same time, right? Or to your other point, it's about eliminating human jobs. Like it's there's a really interesting kind of mix of how people are approaching that. And I think I want to come back to your comment a little bit about employment being dead and decentralization and the role that plays on employee choice and sovereignty and how they allocate their time, their talent, and their financial incentives. But I want to come back to, because you threw it to Erica, and I think that was a good halfway back, because you were kind of commenting on this in your 4 points of your book, Erica. Maybe you'd like to share, because there is going to be that is that friction point of how we retain our talent. And again, I would say even the word retain, there's a choice that's taking place, mutuality of decision of where people spend their time and their effort, right? And that's really you're also speaking to that. That's
Right.
You're engaging their autonomy. It's less about retaining them. It's more about inviting them to spend their energy and their talent and their contributions there as opposed to elsewhere, right?
Right.
And that's
For as long as it's mutually beneficial to both. So, the oftentimes when I do one of my keynotes, the image that I have on the screen is a pendulum. We've gone from the great resignation to the great or not so great recession, this way to that way. And but in a positive way, what the last couple of years has done, I believe, because the days of golden handcuffs are over and the new generations are demanding this, that the old ways of doing things just aren't going to work. And so I was at an event the other night, and there were a lot of older people on the older end of the spectrum. And given what's going on in the economy, there was almost this relief, whether they admitted it or not, but I knew I could see it. They were like, all right, it's going to make my lives easier. We are just going back into the office because people have nowhere else to go. But the retention revolution shows that's not going to work, because the minute that pendulum swings back even a little, those people are leaving. So I do believe it's starting to break down the idea of employers and employees being on opposite sides of the bargaining table. And so, what I'm seeing is that the idea is that we need to do these things within our organizations, how we leverage technology, how and when we bring people together, how we help people develop. They're all good for people and good for our business, but it is a big, big shift in thinking. And a lot of it is being driven by these new generations that are driven by purpose. They want to feel that what they're doing is connected to a big mission. A Gen Z woman said to me this morning at this event I was hosting, she was like, it's not that I don't want to work hard, but I don't want my entire identity I don't want to lead with the fact that all I do is live to work. And she's crushing it at work. And so I think the new generations are bringing in full force what many of us would have wanted. And now we have technology to help us in a really positive way bring this to life.
Well said. Samara, you get to see and hear from to your point, communities when communities, what the demand or interest in are different topics and speakers. And to these points, what are you hearing right now as you plan for the content of the upcoming segment of Transform in this respect?
Yeah, just to add on, I think the conversation around return to work, it's funny, if you asked me during the pandemic, like we plan our agenda later in the cycle because we want to ensure that it's relevant and timely. And so, we continue to monitor the conversations. We have a lot of conversations with leaders across the ecosystem to understand what's timely and relevant for them. And certainly the return to work conversation, right? Remote work, flexibility continues to be very top of mind for the community. And had you asked me a couple of years ago, I think I would have thought the pendulum would have kind of stayed in a certain point versus continuing to kind of swing back and forth. But one of the interesting elements I think that Erica alluded to is the multiple generations and the need now for employers to personalize how they engage with different populations of their employee base. Like clearly one size does not fit all. And that's not just with respect to flexibility, that's with respect to benefits, total rewards, right? There's, learning and development, all of these these workforces, I think, engage in different ways. And that certainly makes it more complex for employers to be able to deal with. But I think that is an increasing conversation about how do you personalize and understand the behaviors and the kind of working norms of each generation. How do you help them understand each other? And ultimately, how do you create an employee experience where everyone can thrive?
Yeah. So each of you has a broad kind of pulse on the market from different organizations, leaders you're working with. Are you seeing some best practices emerge in this respect that are really moving the needle in their culture and really moving the needle in their retention and driving productivity? And you're seeing those results. I mean, are there examples of you could share? Any of you could take that on that of how they're approaching generational personalization across L&D, total rewards, hybrid work, how they're creating connection? Because I think that is a fundamental part of it. For the return office, people are saying they want to drive performance and they want to drive connection, right? And the story is that low performers need to be in the office because they're not able to self-manage. And so that's a key part of it. And at the same time, you often have these younger generations, to your point, that are seeking their peers. They are creating their career identities. And so think back to when you were early in your career, you're building some of your key relationships and your key learning opportunities by being in the same physical space as those who are further ahead in their career or with sharing your interests. And so we're trying with some well-intention to solve those disparate issues, which is kind of why I'm asking the question, are you seeing certain organizations do this really well right now? Because I know, to your point, I think industry broadly or HR broadly is struggling with this. Yeah. And so because of the audience, I think we would love to hear any specific examples on this. So
I can give one that I love from the onboarding chapter, which I know Samara has been reading. And again, a lot of this stuff is not rocket science and it doesn't even have to cost anything. So one of the companies that I profile in the book, it's actually an architecture firm. The CEO or the one of the senior principals went to a conference and heard as an amazing speaker on multi-generational differences. And she decided to build in everybody watching a lecture or seeing this presentation as part of their onboarding. And what she said and why it was so interesting, I mean, yes, there are stereotypes, but there are, nuggets of truth to all of these generational differences. And I think if we understand them, it gives us a perspective that we can, maximize the differences and maybe not take certain things personally. So what she said to me, Sarah Broughton was the woman that I interviewed. So it's an architecture firm, pretty high-end residential. Their clients are Gen Xers and baby boomers. And most of the people that are running the firm are Gen X and millennials. And then a lot of the people that they have working and drafting and doing all of the day-to-day stuff are Gen Z and millennials. And so as people were going through and just understanding these generational differences, what she found was that you might have a Gen Z that's going to have a Gen X boss. And they were like, oh, wow. One of the generalizations about Gen X is that, they really like to pull apart the arguments and peel back the onions and poke holes in things. And so if you know that about your potential boss, maybe you won't take as many things so personally, as a Gen X. And so I think it's bringing this awareness. So that's sort of a way to understand the differences. We can certainly get into sort of compensation and benefits and things for different generations. But what I would also say, it's important for all of us to understand also some things that might unify the generations. And to me, one of the things that's the most important that all of us want is we want to feel connected to purpose. We want to know that what we do, it doesn't matter if you are, the CEO, a middle manager, or the person putting the lights up at the conference, whatever it is, that what you do matters. And so to me, in this moment, that's more and more important. And one of the examples I give in the book, which is a historical one, which is, when JFK went into NASA for the first time, he walked in and he said to the janitor, "What do you do?" And the janitor says, I'm putting a man on the moon. Well, yes, he is. And so I think it's something that let's really lean into the differences and highlight and help people understand each other's differences. But at the end of the day, again, this is rebels in a heart with a heart, and what we all have in common is humanity, that people want to feel like what they do matters.
And I think just to add to that, right, I think part of thinking about creating inclusive workplaces is celebrating those differences, right? Those differences actually challenge us all to be better, right? They bring different perspectives. They approach problem solving differently. They have different experiences. And so creating an environment where all generations can share those perspectives, I think makes us all better. Makes us think about things differently and approach business challenges and opportunities differently than we might otherwise. So understanding them, I think, is important. I think leaning into them and celebrating them is equally important.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of that because understanding, especially the younger generation, is something that we have. Can I just come out and say I think most corporations have failed to do well. It seems like because the younger generation doesn't do it our way, that they are lazy or entitled. I remember in college as a millennial being labeled that way and just confused as I was busting my butt trying to go through school to get this degree so that I could enter the workforce. And our generation complied, right? We got into the workplace. We're like, what is this? This is not what I thought it was going to be. And you know, we got to work and we made it happen. The younger generation won't. If we are brave enough to ask them the hard questions, we might not like the answers. And I think that's why we're afraid to really ask them, like, what do you want out of a career? What if the answer is, I don't want a career? What is a career? My mom had a career. My dad had a career. They worked 30 years at the same company. They got a gold watch. I don't want that style of loyalty. I don't want a boss like micromanaging me. Yes, it's important to have a cause, especially for this younger generation. But do they even believe that they can find a cause, a purpose within corporations as they currently stand? And so these are the hard questions that we have to dig into, is like, does our company really care about understanding our people? Are we running employee engagement surveys? Are we implementing that feedback in a way that makes sense for employees and does improve on their experience? And I'm so glad that we're among, people who have organizations. You are both like giving us the very positive side of things. When we look at it from a critical lens, you look at the younger generation, say, I look at corporate world. I also was birthed out of the anything economy, the creator economy. So I would rather build a career that is bits and pieces of what I like to do, to build skills from a micro lens, to build my own way of doing things. And that's where the formation of Web3 comes from. You can do that, and you can mix and match several streams of income, and you can work when you want, with whomever you want, from wherever you are in the world. And all of a sudden the shackles start to fall off. And so I just want to paint the picture on the full spectrum of corporations. If you can't provide a great experience for employment for me, I'm going to go find it somewhere else.
Is this the genesis of what employment is dead? I feel like now we definitely need to hear the story behind that.
Yes.
We are digging in there. And from a top level, right? Like structurally, I think we can all agree that there are certain forms of work that these models that we are implementing now that no longer serve us. Like, do we really need a 9 to 5? I think the pandemic showed us that like remote work is great. Or who actually does turn off their emails at 7 p.m. at night anymore? How do you find that work-life balance? Who opens up their computer late at night because they do their best work at that point? And so first and foremost, traditional structures are outdated, and they are allowing us, like they're slowing us down, and we are not being as productive as we want to. And the harder we push for that productivity without being human-centric, is we're going to continue to burn people out. We're going to continue to push them away from us. And it's hard to do any of these great things that we're talking about when they just don't trust their leaders. So that's the first level.
Keep going.
I mean, I don't want to take too much time here, but
go ahead.
Right now, employees are burned out. They're disengaged, and obviously the economy is not great. Yes, the pendulum will swing the other way, and they will jump to another job. Which, do they believe it will be any better than what they had? Is the culture any better? We are seeing the pendulum where people are launching off the pendulum and finding their own career path in a decentralized way, whether it's the gig economy or some of these other platforms that are coming out where you can verify your work histories on the blockchain. And now we're getting into the weeds. So I'm going to pause.
I love that we're getting into the weeds. This is a really important thing. I'm going to bring it back high level for a second. We can go back into the weeds because I think you raised an interesting point. Back to this idea, you mentioned cultures of inclusivity and belonging, Samara, right? There's this idea, and Johnny Taylor talks about it a little bit. He talks about, it's inclusive and belonging and diverse as long as we agree, right? It's gotten now to the point we have to have the unity of thought. We can't disagree anymore. Otherwise it's rejected. And to your comment about the younger generation and the search for independence or individualization in their workplace, we run the risk, in my opinion, of people are not working together. They're just rejecting the relationship, and then they're actually complaining about being isolated and independent, but they've created that situation themselves because they refuse to do the deep work that you commented on, Erica, the actual work of connection, of why do we think and act and feel and believe what we believe. And as we unpack those layers of that, what does that do to actually create intimacy in our work relationships and our ability to collaborate meaningfully, to build together? Because to your point, and I love this idea of decentralization and what we're talking about with Web3, truly, and I think it's fascinating, but at the same time, if everyone's independent, where is the unity? Where is the cohesion of resources? Where is the common cause and purpose? And we're seeing that, to your point about the dissolution of structures in our own kind of collective culture as a society. We're seeing that unraveling, like what's our national identity? What do we support? What do we believe? What are our values? And it's something that is, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this, but it's something that's really rooted right now in the moment. And Erica, you were kind of giving voice to it before we came in, just the level of relational and societal and cultural fractioning that's taking place in the American culture, let alone the global culture. I mean, this is really deep, heavy stuff, and we do need to do the work. We do need to lean in as opposed to pull out of it, I think. But there needs to be still an environment for us to have that individualization. And I'm just riffing now, so feel free to grab the ball at any time. But yeah, you got me going on that, Josh. So yeah. Thoughts, anybody?
I mean, to your point, we do have to do the work. And it's hard. It can be scary.
Yeah.
I shared with people, this morning, I think if we as leaders, can lead with a little vulnerability, it takes the temperature down in terms of, we don't have to have it all figured out, but we do want to we should be creating a space to have these conversations. I wrote an article, I can look it up in a minute, maybe stick it in the chat, but I interviewed a woman named Judith Harrison, who's the Chief Diversity Officer at Weber Shandwick, about something that she does there called Time to Connect. And it's funny, I heard her speak at a conference and I went up to her, I was sort of stalking her, and I'm like, do you realize that what you created, she created it after George Floyd was murdered. And then after that, there were so many other events. I mean, sadly, at least in this country, every other day, there's something that's going on that we need to come together to connect around. Yeah. But that was when it started. And what she does, and again, it's not rocket science, but it's very explicit. So here's how it works. And she just did one, literally, I saw her this morning. She's done 3 already of these conversations in the last 10 days, just around what's going on with the war in the Middle East. Yeah. So she brings everyone together. It is virtual. People can even either do type in the chat to have a conversation. They can raise their hand and go off mute, or they can just listen. She opens it by writing and then reading prepared remarks about her take on what is going on in the world. She leads with some vulnerability with it for herself. Depending on the issue, she'll share how the company is supporting it and showing up. And then, but what I love, and I sort of pointed this out to her, having studied, the science of rituals, she ends her introductory comments with one line to everyone. And what she says is, and I ask you, and this is to like 300 people every other week, and I just want to ask you, how are you doing? And then she opens it up, and it's not always the easiest. In the last week, she's had to shut down some of the political conversations that have been percolating up. She sets the ground rules. She says, we are one community and we are here to support each other as humans. And her role in this is to moderate it. And, you know, you have people getting off of mute saying, look, like, I am not okay. And again, creating an opportunity, leveraging the technology in this example to let people be more human at work. And the last thing I'll say on it, and it's not in that newsletter, I think it's in my newsletter, but after 2 weeks ago, when she did one of these around the war, she had a woman go off mute and raise her hand and say, I am a woman, I am Black, and I am Jewish. I feel like I am getting hit from all sides, and I don't even know which end is up, but all I know is how amazing it felt for someone in my company to ask me how I was doing. And so we don't need to overcomplicate it.
Mhm. Well said. I mean, I was sharing with you.
So well said.
Go ahead, Samara. You want to riff with
No,
that?
I just was saying so well articulated. Thank you for sharing that story with us.
Yeah. And people are struggling, to your point, on this exact point. I mean, there's been months now, and it's been particularly pronounced over the last month, to your point, Erica. And, you know, I think I share with you all that Life Gods, you know, we were getting demands from our clients saying, we need a topic specifically that addresses what's going on in this geopolitical stress. Like, we called that topic finding peace in a polarizing world, because no matter where you are, people are suffering. Their identities, their communities, their families, people are struggling, and they're looking for environments and communities to support where they can be safe, they can express what's going on. And those differences, those unique, attributes of their experience are celebrated, welcomed, and able to be discussed openly. And it's something that has been a significant shift in the last 4 years. If you look at that conversation happening in the workplace right now on a big level, I mean, and the expectations around employers to have a voice or a stance on everything right now. It's a really complex environment, and it's affecting the entire system. So
yeah, Derek, and to that point, I feel like especially employees right now should be tuning into how their boss, how their company is treating them in this moment, because employee experience design is not going away. It feels like it. There was a huge push last year. We were saying things like the war on talent is over and talent finally won, and how far from the truth it feels today. Yeah. But it's the same cycle that happened in the pandemic. How am I being treated in this moment of individualization of the work schedule and understanding how I fit into the greater mold? We have employees right now who don't feel like their companies care about them. That should be the starting point, right? If we aren't listening and understanding, this goes back to engagement, then how can we design experiences that help them overcome the challenges that they're facing? And so I think it's just really important right now in this moment to look at the landscape. Who's valuing employee experience design? Who's valuing shareholder experience? And how do you as an employee decide where your needs are met? Unfortunately, the ownership comes down to the individual employee. And unfortunately, we see employees jump from one toxic work culture to the next. Eventually, they're going to jump to a Web3 model for work that actually starts to meet their needs. For me, the crux of it all stands for HR is dealing with real problems right now. Yeah. Employees they have a lot of needs that are evolving, and we need to be addressing those needs. If we aren't, then how can we gain that buy-in, that trust? Yeah. And that affects productivity, right? Which brings it full circle for most of these organizations. What's the ROI of the work that we are doing? What's the ROI of Rebels with a Heart, right? It's making sure that we look at the long-term goals, that the short-term gains, yes, it's important to run hard at the end of the year. It's Q4. Let's get it done. But if we do that at the expense of our people, it's not going to look great in the future.
We completely agree, Josh. I'm curious, for the folks who may not be as familiar, can you kind of articulate what is a Web3 work vision? What does that look like for people that may not be as familiar with this idea? Obviously, not everyone is. So maybe you could talk a bit about that.
And we don't have to get into the weeds of the technology, what it looks like. What I care about most is the application of this tech, especially from an HR lens. So Erica, you talked about companies having a purpose. If an employee can feel connected to the purpose of the organization, they're happier, they work better, they stay longer, attrition goes down, all of those great things. I think from like a 1980s Franklin Covey lens, what that looks like is let's put the mission, vision, and standards and ideals up in the break room. Done. We've just solved the culture. And we know that it's much more than that. But what we see from a Web3 lens is, what if an individual, their purpose isn't necessarily tied to the greater vision of the company. Their purpose is the specific skill or capability that they have. And when they work in a full-time setting, it feels like they only get to do 10% of that skill, and 90% of the rest is just dealing with the bureaucracy and all the other things. But I'm doing that so that I can do what I love. Web3 can and hopefully will flip the pattern there and say, here, go out and do 90% of what you love, because you have a skill. It's verified on the blockchain, which means it's a trustless resume. It's not self-reported. It's not me just, this is what I can do. You just have to trust me. It's actually verified. My skills and the courses that I've taken, it's all verified. And now AI can match you on projects. You don't work for a company. You work for several DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations, at the same time. And they're plugging you in because you have a skill and a capability. And now you're working for several different companies on your own, own world, doing it in a way that makes sense for you when you want. You don't necessarily have a boss micromanaging you, and you can earn income in that way. So that's just one example of what that looks like. Are we there today? Absolutely. In certain spheres. Mass adoption is another question.
I'll just say to that point, and kind of bridging the conversation here, there are organizations now that are acting, for lack of a better term, as PEOs for multiple organizations. Like, so as a gig employee, for example, or a part-time worker, if you want to work for, and these are not the names that are validated, I'm just using as an example. If you want to work for Uber, and you want to work for Walmart, and you want to work for a retail chain, and you want to work for yourself, you can receive benefits from a kind of a shared service model through this organization from all of them. They're all contributing in certain ways. And so that in of itself, to your point, where we're now able to literally allocate our time and resources across organizations, is part of the future that you're talking about. And it's existing right now, right? I mean, I know organizations are doing this. So it's pretty wild stuff when you think about it. And how does that, I mean, as you hear that, I mean, I know you're in this area, Erica, how does that align with your book philosophical view, right? When you think about truly the war for talent is a whole nother discussion point when you put the sovereignty in that individual where they want to put their time, right? It's no longer just a one-to-one relationship. It's a one-to-many.
That's at the heart of the retention revolution. I mean, one, I would say, if people say to me, oh, well, now it's an employer's market, I say to them, well, there has always been, and there will always be a war for your top talent. Like, you don't want to lose. There are certain people you just don't want to lose. It doesn't matter what's going on in the market. I mean, you could maybe lose these 10 and it wouldn't matter, but this one. And so that's why we just need to get off the train of like everybody being on different sides. I also, I worked at Russell Reynolds as an executive recruiter, and I wonder if we all come back, 5 years from now and have this conversation. I bet that resumes are going to look totally different. That it's really just going to be like I will admit this is the way it was done back in the day. If I saw a resume and they moved to all these places, it was like red flag, crumple it up, toss it over my shoulder in the garbage. Kind of kidding, but not really. And so now I think those days are over, and there's just going to be a shift, to your point about, what are the skills? What kind of value can I, and if we take off this layer of, if you're only there for, 8 months, it's necessary, it's a bad thing. I just think we're turning all of this on its head. And if we can shift our thinking into, these people, they're going to be with me. Maybe it's in as a portfolio, someone has a portfolio career and they're with me as a fractional or a gig person part-time. But even with our full-time employees, we're going to be together until it doesn't work for one of us. And when that's the case, if we can leave gracefully and stay connected, as we all know, and we've seen the articles, even Salesforce, that fired all those people and now they're trying to get them to come back. The challenge becomes, how did they leave? Like, did they leave gracefully, or do people feel awful? And so this retention revolution is, we might have boomerangs, or the day after a person leaves, there's still a client or a customer. And so it's, I mean, I would just say, yes, I agree with what you're all saying.
I think that example you just provided, both Salesforce, but also just the idea of the mass hiring and the mass layoffs that have taken place over the last couple of years, is going to be a fascinating example that we'll be talking about.
But it's not new, because I was an executive coach. I worked at NYU in 2008, right? So I live in New York City. The world was imploding. I would have people come into my office that were fired from, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. They went to a fancy undergrad. They got their MBA. They would never have thought they would be laid off in a million years, and so they were coming into my office before they even went home to share the news with their families. So it is this virtuous cycle that it happened then, it's going to happen now, and it's going to happen again in the future, which is why I feel like the commonality that we all have is that if we do these things, leveraging tech, getting people together in person in Vegas in March, and doing things that are more human, these are things that we need to do irrespective of these pendulum swings.
I completely agree. Josh,
I do just want to say that, like, it does look like a virtuous cycle, and like human nature and the nature of work and workforce ecosystems is going to continue to look and feel in some way, but there are technological advances that will favor employees. I say employees, I'm just referring to the workforce in general. There's going to be an opportunity for them to say, like, see ya, like, I no longer have to work for you. Right now, I work for you because I have to. I have to pay the bills. I have to have a job. And this is just the steps towards that. But there will be a moment where I believe that employees will have enough power to say, I don't have to work for you. I have all of these other options. Like, the gig model now works for everybody at any time. And I don't have to work harder for them than I have to work for you. And, oh, by the way, like, the benefits of my work-life balance that I've been asking for years, I can actually have it here, right?
That's happening now, to your point.
Yeah, I was going to say it's happening now.
Yeah, that's why retail, it's why you're making, $18 an hour in McDonald's right now. It's why, restaurants, retail chains, they can't find workers right now. This is the exact reason. Because people are just saying, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go do a gig job. I'm going to go do different things, right? And to your point around even just the evolution of currency is along with your topic, is part of this, right? How people are being compensated. And that's a whole nother conversation we could have related to decentralization. But this has been amazing. Samara, would you like to kind of put the cherry on top here? Anything you've heard on the conversation from this last little bit?
I don't know if I have a cherry. I agree with everything that everyone else said here. I mean, I think it's so. I don't know that we have time for me to pontificate on just memories and conversations about, how the resume should be dead. I feel like that was a conversation I started having 10 or 15 years ago. But I have hope that there's a lot more, I think, forward movement and technology that can support looking at skills, right, as kind of the common denominator. And I think in an environment where we start looking at skills, hopefully that creates opportunity both for people to leverage those skills in portfolio ways within organizations, as well as across organizations. So really interesting topics. And, I think a lot of HR leaders in particular, have experienced so much burnout over the past 5 years, that they are really embracing kind of this portfolio approach, taking a lot of fractional work, doing a lot of consulting, giving back to the community, helping fuel innovation with new startups. And so it's exciting, I think, to see that and to have an environment that is going to foster that more in the future, in whatever way you want to take your career journey, whether it's internally within an organization or across a broader spectrum or portfolio. I'm just excited to see the possibilities.
Indeed. Well, thank you for being here. Real quickly, Samara, where can people, I know we talked about March in Vegas, where can people learn more about Transform, the event you're hosting?
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to see everyone in Vegas in March 11th to 13th at the Wynn Las Vegas. You can learn more at transform.us.us and feel free to reach out. I'm sure all of us would be happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn or otherwise, and would love to stay in touch.
We will include that in the show notes. And Erica,
Yes.
where can people get your newest book as well as the entire trilogy?
You can get any information, yay, Samara, on my website, which is just ericakeswin.com. The books are at Barnes & Noble. I love supporting local bookstores. Of course, they're on Amazon. As any author, we one of the things that's so important to us is to get people to review the book. So that's always helpful too. But and the other thing I would say, I've now just launched my 4th LinkedIn Learning course, and the 4th one launched yesterday, which is all about upskilling and internal mobility. So if you click on the link on LinkedIn, it's actually free right now. So anybody could check that one out.
Yes, I'll do that. And Josh, for those folks who are captivated by the weeds of our conversation related to DAOs and Work3 and Web3 and decentralization and all these different pieces, where can they learn more about the Work3 Institute?
Yeah, work3.me is our website. I'm hyperactive on social media, so I would love to keep the conversation going at Josh Drean. That's my LinkedIn, my TikTok, if you're into that, my Instagram, and we're constantly posting content, great work-related content, so I'd love to see you there.
Awesome. And I would just echo in the comments from the notes from Greta. Yes, the Compassion 2.0 community, of which Life Guides is a founding partner as well, is doing a lot of work. And we're doing a lot of work as well around the idea of measuring the ROI of care. So happy to share more through that and through Life Guides. And to each of you as our rebels, thank you for being here. Thank you for being who you are and being rebels of the heart. Thank you for joining us as part of our alumni community. And looking forward to doing this amazing work with you throughout this season and in 2024. And thank you to all of our guests who join us today and will watch this later. We appreciate the Rebels with the Heart community and wishing all of you an amazing Thanksgiving in the US and beyond. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. See ya.
Bye.